What up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of the Blurred Binder. Thank you all for being here with us today, brought to you by the wonderful NMPA and Black Press USA. Here with me today is animator, illustrator, and outstanding creator, Adisa Kaareem. Just a little bit about Adisa. Adisa was born in Hartfield, Connecticut, in a home full of Caribbean culture. He loved art from an early age. At 3 years old, he was learning and growing, and through that, he was inspired by the shows and movies he grew up with, which would constantly force him to drive him to pursue a career as an illustrator in the animation community. Adisa graduated during the height of the pandemic in 2020, and he has now earned many opportunities working for companies like the Huffington Post, Disney TV Animation, Nickelodeon, and most recently, Netflix. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adisa Kaareem.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again, Noah.
Not a problem, man. It's always an honor to be here, man. I'm really happy. I get to say that you're one of my personal friends, and I'm excited that we get to finally sit down and have this conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So.
Oh, wait a minute, Adisa. You went out a little bit on me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Great. Absolutely fantastic. Okay. So let's just start here with animation one. Animation one. With question one. So you have in your bio that, the animation and movies and television that you watched, inspired you to become the artist that you are today. If you had to pick one, what was the lead?
The lead, I would say, was when I was very young.
All right. Noah, I don't know if you took your headphones out, but we're getting an echo. It's a delay, and it's an echo.
Okay. Okay.
Wait, yeah, you have to leave the headphones in. Let's see if I can't hear it now, but you have to leave the headphones in. When you take them out, we definitely hear an echo. There's a little bit of a delay. I could tell by when you respond to what he's saying.
Yeah,
I could tell there's a little delay, but that's not a big deal. But if you take the headphones out, you may hear it normally, but everybody else hears what they've already said. It's already been said. All right, so let's back up. If you want to.
Okay, cool. Since this is being recorded.
Yeah, I could edit out this part, but if you want to ask that question again.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's run it back from the beginning. Okay. Adisa, what, you, in your bio, you had said that film and television influenced you to become an illustrator and animator. Mm-hmm. What particular piece of work inspired that? Was there any, for writers, right, or filmmakers, we can point to, say, Star Wars, Citizen Kane.
Right.
What was it for you?
Well, for me, it is hard to narrow it down to a specific show, but everything growing up was more of a visual, inspiration. And one show that I can narrow down was being a really small kid, staying up past my bedtime and sneaking out of my bedroom to watch Samurai Jack. And what really got me involved with that show was not mainly the animation of the characters moving around, but really the environments that the characters were involved in, and seeing how each setting, every environment was specific to that story, and realizing as I got older that backgrounds and layouts themselves can become an entire character, and they often lead the narrative for what's to come.
That's amazing. That's echoed throughout many works, right? Mm-hmm. When people do a Batman movie or a Batman TV show, right? Gotham, but really this goes to any comic book or piece of work with established IP, right? Like Superman, Metropolis, right? These are all individual cities who have to have their own characters, right?
Right.
Just, let's just speak in universe terms, right? Like, I'm not gonna, if I go to Gotham, I'm not gonna expect Lex Luthor, right? Or, they're their own characters. I don't think you could have described it any other way, man. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
so,
and even
okay, so Samurai. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just gonna state like that's a much older example, but even as I got older, more recent examples. I don't know if you've ever heard of the show Primal, where it's 2D animated. There's very little dialogue, and the whole show is carried by visual narrative. And when you're watching Primal, you'll see how the characters, they'll be in a forest or they could be in a tundra, and you really feel what the characters are going through based on the layouts they're involved in. So there are little details like that that translate to me how to tell a story with my environments, and it's often helped me in my recent work. So that's just a little thing that I like to pay attention to.
You know, what is, you know, you're in the field, right? And before we go a little bit on, you know, some of the stuff you've worked on, what is your favorite part of animating or illustrating backgrounds?
That's a great question. I would have to say my favorite part would be, in times, depending on the assignment, the creative liberties that I'm allowed to take. Often I'll get an assignment where, you know, when you're working in animation, they give you the layout, the color script, they tell you what's going on in the scene, they give you the animatics so you know exactly how the scene feels. But here and there, I get the opportunity where they tell me, you know how the scene feels, you've been doing this for a while now. Try to put yourself into it, or try to put what you feel this scene makes you feel into the layout. And that is when I truly enjoy my job the most, because it allows me to then put some emotion behind the environment itself.
How often are you allowed creative liberties, right? So would you say, you know, and how do they differ from studio to studio?
It really depends on not only the overall project that's being worked on, but also just kind of the method that the pipeline works through. I would say that every assignment I'm giving, there's always a certain level of creative liberty, and that level itself is what can change depending on where we are in the show. Sometimes the liberties can go as far as, you know, you may need to pick most of these colors, and other times it's a lot stricter where we have the color script, you need to stick to that, but also its placement, its color balance, the way you depict the lighting, that's up to you. So it's really a as need be basis, but it differentiates depending.
But it was so okay. So it's dependent on the pipeline, right? That's a good segue, right? Tell us about what the projects that you've been working on that you can, and you know, a little bit about them and your process.
Well, I can only speak about one of them really. The other one has yet to be announced, so NDA. But for Nickelodeon, I've been working on a preschool show called Santiago of the Seas, which I'm sure everyone with a child has heard of. And that show has been very interesting for me personally, because stepping into the industry, I was marketing myself primarily as a 2D backgrounds layout artist. And that is the position I started on with Santiago. But as I began to move further, working on a 3D animated show as opposed to 2D, I began to discover a really big interest in color design and how environments can go beyond just the scene itself. I'll often get, for example, one of our characters, her homeland. I'll get her homeland. I'll have to paint the environment, the props around it, and then really realizing that down to the smallest detail as, you know, the color of the flooring, or even the way certain stained glass windows may appear depending on where the light source is. It's been a very eye-opening experience, especially being only 2 years into my field, realizing just how much detail goes into color design and layout painting.
So you had mentioned that you were working on a kid's show, right? Without, I'm not sure how much you can speak about the other project, but, well, actually, let me rephrase it. Have you worked on what is considered adult animation?
The irony there is that while I work on a kid's show for Netflix, I also work on an adult animation for, as I work on a kid's show for Nickelodeon, I work on an adult animated show for Netflix, which is a complete opposite end of the spectrum. We have a 3D preschool kid show, and then we have a 2D adult animated show. And I can't talk about what it is or what it entails, but it has been a very different experience.
Is there any difference creatively, or, you know, structurally, or as you had mentioned before, in the pipeline on working on these two vastly different projects?
Aside from the general what piece goes to which artist, part of the pipeline, I will say there has been a difference in delegation. Whereas, one job I may receive an ample amount of time to do a lot of assignments that may be trickier or require a lot more critical thinking. Whereas the other job, I get 1 week to do a few assignments, and it's something that I know very well. I understand the process of, and it's more about the time consumption and management that goes behind creating an efficient piece. So it's different in the way of where the difficulties lie. I won't say either job is easier than the other. I can't say I've experienced that yet. But there are certain parts of the team aspect of things that I see where the difference is in my contribution to things.
My question is, so, COVID-19 has really jacked a lot of artists, right, man?
Yes.
How has the animation community been affected?
Well, like I said, or like you said, actually, I graduated in the height of the first wave of shutdowns for the US. And a lot of my experience with animation prior to that was kind of through the lens of college, where I'm not all the way into it. I haven't received those opportunities yet. And now we're in a pandemic and I'm going full force into the one thing I've been studying most of my life. And I will say that as far as I can tell, it has really changed the way a lot of recruiters or animation teams view artists and their value to animation or shows in general. I've noticed that there's been a bigger push with most studios, especially with most careers out there nowadays, to have people that work from home, to have people that, still do the studio work, and obviously there's studio equipment that can't be replaced. But we have seen in the last 2 years just how efficiently, though challenging, a lot of productions have been able to release their shows, multiple seasons even, and everyone can still work from home and, get things done the way they need to. So as far as I can tell, the change has been, there has been a lot more opportunity open in the sense of where people are to work on what show they work with. I work with people that live in, some people work still in the studio location in California or wherever the studio may be. Other people I know live in Canada. Some people live in the Midwest, really random states that you wouldn't expect animators and illustrators to work in. So I can definitely say that the main difference through the pandemic has been the opportunity that has opened up for a lot of people working in my field. The fact that I'm able to get a job for studios thousands of miles away and still be in my current location means that there's so much more room for me to, I guess, just grasp at any opportunity that comes my way.
So there's more accessibility is what I'm hearing, and that's amazing. How did you get your work out there? COVID-19. As it's. Let me rephrase the question. Right. There's so many artists out there, who push their work out into the world. How did you stand out?
That's a very interesting question to try and answer, and it's a little tricky to articulate that. The main challenge I faced with COVID-19 was no longer being able to physically travel to certain events where studio and industry professionals are, and to meet them and to speak with them face to face. That was my plan for college ending, and I had to completely switch that up. So I then had to resort to online and social media platforms to really present the work that I've created on my own, the work I've collaborated with others, and to simultaneously push my personality and my information out there as well. I've noticed there's been a huge spike in something as simple as Instagram and Twitter, where people have really taken it a lot more seriously to display themselves. And then you have websites like LinkedIn and things like that that really make sure that you have the room to fully display what you're capable of. So for me, that's what I had to resort to in order to get my name and my work noticed.
Wow, that's great advice for any animator that's out in the world. This is a great segue. We have some of your work pulled up for you right now, and we're going to take the time to give everybody out there who hasn't seen your work yet an opportunity to check it out.
Sounds good. Okay, so just to speak through the work, I guess, as it's displayed, this was actually a commission I completed for HuffPost, and it was for an article, to the best of my memory, regarding the oil pollution in the Gulf of Mexico. And when it comes to a piece like this piece is very, how I like to say, linear for me. It's usually given to me in a means of, here's a prompt, here's what we want to depict, and we want to know if you can depict that. So for me, this process was very much listening to what the company themselves wanted and how they wanted to tell that story, but also on my end of it, picking a color scheme that kind of showed the dread in it and how eerie and how messed up of a situation it can be without making it too grungy and too unappealing for the audience to visually take in. And this piece here was actually another commission of mine. There was a local person who wanted to, they wanted to have me draw the Tampa theater, which was where they had met their wife and where they like started their relationship. So this one was also a lot more straightforward in the sense of having a clear-cut reference to work from and just putting my own approach onto it. As you can see, I like working in very flat and shape-based colors while building textures and materials on top of them. And then I often focus on the light source to give a lot of my objects form and to give them a more believable sense as to being in the scene or what that would have felt like to have been there at that time. And this was actually the second part of that very same commission, which is very hilarious that you pulled this up. This was where that same couple ended up getting married. So it was more or less doing the same process with this piece as well, and also kind of like reminding them how bright and how things felt when they got married that day, and how like all the shrubbery and the warm colors, the beautiful day, it really invokes a certain feeling that they had asked of me to provide for them. And this one is actually one of my personal favorites. It's based on, I don't remember the name of the city, but it is based on a place in Georgia called the School Bus Graveyard. And you can sort of walk around and you get to see all these buses that like hundreds of people just kind of walk up to, and they paint and they display their own creative works. And so I just felt inspired when I saw this area, and I walked around, observed a lot of what I saw, and I came across these two buses that at the time of day had a really cool effect with the lighting, where you're still getting the overcast from the whole sky, but the sun is setting directly behind them, and you can see those strong contrasts. And then paying attention to the age of the work that was done to the buses, while also paying attention to the age of the buses themselves. Some pieces looking newer than others. You can tell that some buses have been painted a lot more recently, applying those textures in there. As you can see on the door on the left side, you get a lot of that kind of spray painted but scratched and weathered away feel. And honestly, this one is one of my favorites. It was really fun to accomplish. And this one here was actually, this was actually part of a huge campaign I was doing to market myself during the height of the pandemic. And this was equal parts a school assignment, but also a portfolio piece. This is actually my childhood bedroom where I grew up. And this project for me was a way of displaying my nostalgia while weirdly being back home to a house that is now completely changed from where I grew up, but also walking around it and remembering, you know, those strong emotions of like, this was my safe space. This was my place of calm to get my thoughts out, to really just be me. And I wanted to put that in a piece. Oh, this is a much older piece. Now we're going backwards into college. This was a small study I did. I think it took about an hour or two to complete when I was in the Tai O village of Hong Kong. It was just a fishing village off the coast, and it was just one of my favorite parts of being there. And this is a part of the project mentioned with the bedroom. This is another room of my childhood home, which also shares like an interest that my mother and I share. We both love plants and we love keeping them alive and just observing them. So that was another emotion that I wanted to capture, and depicting that room with all the plants in it as I remember them was very, very heartwarming for me. And again, this is also an extension of that same project. This piece of it, I then took a bit more challenge to it. I ventured outside. I ventured to a place not far from home, but was a part of my home where I grew up, where you have the corner stores, the pizza shop, you know, you got the salon, the barber shop, everything like that. And I took that area and I decided to make it a study where I can show that I can depict the same scenes in multiple lighting, because as most of us that work in animation know, you got to be able to pick a color scheme that's believable to the time of day and the setting that you are surrounded by. So something as simple as for an example, the sidewalk. We all know what color pavement is, but what most people don't focus on is the fact that the color of something changes depending on the light and the time of day. So as you can see, the top piece having a more whitish off-white tone to its pavement, and like a stronger contrast with those shadows, to where you get to the evening, the shadows are a bit more even. You still have that strong lighting coming from a different direction, but the colors are completely different. You now have a much cooler purple type of pavement tone, all the way down to the night setting where things are just very blued out and you're really only relying on the light source of the props around you, the street lights, the shops that are still open if they're open. And yeah, this was a very challenging piece for me at the time. And I think doing this really showed me my own capabilities and just how far I could go in the animation industry as long as I continue to push myself. So that's another one of my favorites, if I'm being honest. Here we have another commission. Back to the nostalgia sense of my work. It was a local commission, and the person who wanted to gift an image to their father about an RV that they grew up with, which was really nice and really sweet. So that was a part of my process where it was just listening to what the person wanted and depicting the scene that they wanted it in.
Wow. That was all beautiful work, man. Like, that was just amazing. I hadn't seen most of this, and man, that was absolutely amazing, man. I can easily say you were, one of the greatest artists I've ever seen.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let me ask you, just for the people out here who, who are looking to see, are you still taking commissions?
I am still taking commissions. I do have only a few slots open. I like to keep myself generally in a 5 to 10 slot basis when it comes to commissions, because I do still actively work for 2 studios at the moment, Netflix and Nickelodeon. So I am taking commissions. However, I am also being very strategic on how I take them and which ones I'm taking.
Great. I'm sure you'll get plenty of responses in your private messages. Let me ask you, so working for these different studios, what is the workplace like? How is it different company to company?
I can't say there's much of a difference in terms of like company to company, because, the workplace life for me takes place here. This is my home office in my apartment. And, that's a bit of the downside to the pandemic. I still have yet to experience what it's like working in a true office with people side by side. But everything has been on my end very, very easy to follow along to. I thankfully work with really great artists, and they're always willing to help. They understand that I'm newer to the industry, and they're not afraid to answer questions for me. So there's still that really strong co-worker vibe, I suppose, like that easy correspondence, the question answer give and take mentality is still there. But the work environment, I can tell, is drastically different from what it traditionally used to be. And for me, it's really just about focusing in my own bubble, getting my cup of tea, setting a good playlist, and going to work.
Absolutely beautiful, man. I'm loving it. Wow. So as we go down through here, what has been the greatest joy in doing this?
I don't mean to sound cliche or sappy. However, for me personally, my position in my industry is my greatest joy. And I tell people this all the time when they ask me what inspires me. Like, even telling you the shows I watch, I've loved the arts from a very early age. And when it comes to drawing, I've been drawing for as long as I can remember, literally since I was 3 years old. And for me, it was just about learning more and more as I got older. So when it comes to the place I'm in now, this is literally exactly where I wanted to be growing up my entire life. And it's hard for me to differentiate a specific point of it that's like, this is it, when really every day I go to work, it's not the same for me as like going to work, if you know what they say. You know how they say when you're working in your passion, you're not really working. And I never knew that was true until now. So every day I log on, I do what I got to do. I talk to the people I like working with, and everyone gives me feedback. I submit for review. At the end of the day, for me, it's all a part of what I love doing.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, so now that we've asked what the best part is, what's the worst part?
Like I said, the worst part is definitely having to rely on yourself to not only market, to get your name out there, and also to keep up the work. Like as I described earlier, this is my office, and the biggest challenge about that is that when certain challenges arise in the pipeline, you can't really just walk to your production manager and let them know what's going on. Things do take a bit longer in the sense of having to email somebody and waiting for them to get back to you. I know a lot of people can attest to this. Sometimes we don't have the technology available in the moment, and sometimes networks can go down or files can get lost. There have been a lot of challenges I've faced, surprisingly, in just the 2 short years I've been doing this, but there's always a solution, and it's really about everybody holding their patience together and figuring it out as a team.
That's amazing. What's it like switching from teams to team, though? You're working on multiple projects with multiple different people. Can it be difficult adjusting?
I haven't faced any challenges adjusting quite yet. Like I said, because everything is from home, it's very easy for me to realize that I'm just talking to one team about a particular subject, and then I'm talking to another team about a different subject. And I'm very grateful to say that everyone I have worked with so far, at least the people that have directly interacted with me, has been very pleasant, very understanding, very honest, and willing to teach. So I haven't had much of a challenge in switching teams or working amongst 2 different teams, because more or less the atmosphere is the same. It's really about helping each other and getting the job done. So it hasn't been, as of yet, it hasn't been too challenging in that aspect.
You said something interesting. Teaching, right? Is when most of us go out into the workplace, right, we're expected to have this vast knowledge backed up by either a degree or resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is animation the sort of thing, and illustration, not just exclusively, that thing where you have to keep learning?
Well, speaking on illustration more than animation, since that's my field, it's definitely something where things change and you have to learn to adjust, especially on a technical sense. From a literal standpoint, we work on applications like Photoshop, where every other month Photoshop has a different update, and sometimes someone has to show you that, hey, if you want to create a clipping mask, they changed it from this key to that key. And then on a more intricate sense, sometimes it gets down to realizing that certain pieces of the pipeline, maybe your studio has adjusted or realized isn't as efficient as they hoped. So in my personal experience, I've had a lot of people that have been working longer than me just kind of coming up to me in a respectful manner and showing me, hey, I see what you did with this part of the piece. I just wanted to let you know that if it's too much, or maybe here's a different way to do it that's a lot easier for you or a lot more efficient, or here's something that just looks better. And, in the same time, while they have to be willing to show me those things and ensure that I'm doing the best job that I can do, I also have to make sure that I'm staying open-minded and taking in information as I'm receiving it, realizing that, there are certain things that will work for me that don't work for others and vice versa, but also people that work here have been here as long as they have for a reason. So it doesn't hurt to take advice.
So my next question is, other than, you had mentioned TV and film inspired works, do you take inspiration from other fields, right? Such as other illustrations, literature, things of that nature?
I take a lot of inspirations from a lot of visual arts, and that's just because of the person I am. I take in things visually and I process that in a very particular way. So for me, a lot of my inspirations comes through observation. It can be from observing other forms of media, to dance, to performance, to movies, or even just observing my everyday life. Sometimes I can go out to my balcony and notice something about the forest that I didn't notice the day before. Or even walking down the road and realizing like, oh, that's what that looks like in reality, and this is how I can depict it in my own work. So for me, it's really just about keeping my eyes open, observing, taking it all in, and also taking reference, because as you know, I'm definitely the person that will whip out their phone to take a picture of just a random fence because the sun hit it a particular way. So it's really about, for me at least, taking in those things that I see and just realizing the beauty in them and how they can apply to my work.
So, in the 2020, a lot of things happened in the country and around the world. In the tone of civil rights, right? How has illustration and animation in those, how they combine in the entertainment industry as a whole been affected, right? Do you see more illustrators and animators of color? Does the topics of the shows you're working on, do they change?
From what I've experienced, yes, it has made a huge impact on a lot of the conversations that people have in the workplace, as well as the actual products that are being made. I know a lot of culture goes into making Santiago of the Seas because the creator herself is a woman of color, a Puerto Rican, that puts a lot of her childhood into that show. And then in terms of the workplace, I have seen more of a push towards hiring more Black illustrators and animators and other illustrators and animators of color. It is a push that is going to take a lot of time to fully accomplish. However, I do see a change in conversations being had, and also a change in tolerance of, certain things that were never okay, people actually holding accountable to say that's not okay. So it has been a slightly positive experience.
Man, I'm glad to see that, things are changing for the better for people of color and other marginalized groups. So if I was in your position, right, and I wanted to go to, let's say, Cartoon Network, and I said, hey, I have this show idea. What is it like for an illustrator or somebody working on, would you call it below the line, or would it be above the line if we're comparing it to film works?
I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to in terms of the line.
Oh, so basically, below the line workers are everybody who, is on set day to day. They are, the lighters, the gaffers, the PAs, right? Above the line are writers, producers, directors. I guess then it would be above the line work would be animation. How easy is it for you to go and pitch a show?
I would say that all the challenges that have been there are definitely still there. It's not as simple as saying I have an idea and people actually look at it. Like I said, in terms of like opening up the industries and having more people of color stuff, there's still a lot of challenges to face, and we have a long way to go. Personally, I haven't experienced making those challenges yet, or like making that decision to go up to someone with my own ideas. However, I do believe with more of us being in the industry, and as more of us come into the industry, it will soon open up a lot more opportunities for us to make those choices and to speak to people about things like that. Not a decision I've made myself, as I've said, so it's a little bit harder to speak on what that's distinctly like.
Okay. Wow. Well, as I said, with anybody in this industry, it was never an easy, as you said, it was never easy. And those challenges are still there. But, as people of color, it would get instrumentally harder for us to get our ideas out into the world. Yes. But Santiago of the Sea proves that it's not impossible. It's been absolutely great. Let's go a little more into that. When did you start working on Santiago of the Sea? Was that the first, big gig after graduating?
It was actually the first big gig right before graduation. I started working for them September of 2020, and I hadn't graduated until November of 2020. So it was kind of interesting because they didn't ask me if I was still in school, and generally you don't get hired in the industry, at least not in animation, when you're still a student. So I just, I didn't lie, of course, but it was never brought up, so I never said anything.
I mean, let's just, I guess it doesn't matter now, now that you're out of school, but if we had this conversation a year and a half ago, we'd be probably singing a different song.
What I just shared with you, I would not have shared.
So, what is, what's the, what's the next steps, man? Tell us what is the next for you.
Well, for me, especially with the industry and how seriously they take artists, it's really about hitting those milestones in a short-term sense. Like I said, I've been here doing what I've been doing for 2 years. And generally, once you get that 3-year mark, people then actually pay attention to you as far as saying, this is what I've done, and they believe you. And beyond that, I'm just taking in as much information as I can to eventually work my way up to being an art director one day soon. And that has been a pretty cool experience. I've had my own art directors share like certain tips and informations with me that will help me in the long run. So those are just more of my short-term goals. And in terms of a long-term goal, I would love to work my way up to like production and things like that. However, there is so much more in between to learn, and I'm just taking it one day at a time.
Wow. Aspirational, man. But look how far you've come in just what? 2 years,
Thank
maybe
you.
3. Like,
Thank you.
absolutely good. Do you have any ideas that you potentially would want to do? And if so, could you share them?
I don't have any ideas as of yet. Personally, I do find a lot more enjoyment in bringing other people's ideas to life. And I know that's more of where my mentality just is right now in working in animation. And I know that is subject to change in the future. So no ideas as of yet.
Well, if you had any advice to give to any, person out here who wants to be an illustrator or an animator, what would you say to them?
That's a really tough one, because what hasn't been said by now. But just going off of my experience, I think what kept me going was the notion of knowing that once I figured out this is what I truly wanted to do, it no longer became a matter of if, it just became a matter of when. So my biggest advice to other illustrators and animators, especially people of color, don't stop. A lot of us grew up in the generation where our own parents would even tell us, hey, you want to pursue an art career, but that's not really a practical career. You can't make money off of that. You can't survive off of it. Don't let those voices be the ones that stick out to you. You just have to make sure that if this is something you genuinely love, that you put all of your effort into it, you gain the skills necessary that are required of you for what you want to do, and you just keep going until eventually somebody will say yes. It's going to be hard, and there are going to be days where the industry will not like you back, but those are challenges that we are faced with. And if you do love it enough, you have the right to work for it.
Wow. So, for our audience out here, where can they find you and your works at?
You can find me. I actually have my own portfolio website, which later on this year, hopefully I'll be able to put more of my industry work on. But you can find my personal website at www.adisakareem.com. That is my first and middle name, ADISAKAREEM.com. And if you'd like to find me on social media, you can find me on Instagram as disa.reem. That's DISA.REEM. And on Twitter, I am Adisa Kaareem Art. And of course, if you find my social medias, I do have a Linktree link that will direct you to all of those platforms.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Adisa, for coming and sitting down with us. We really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation. I'm always happy to share my experience.
I 100% agree. And, we thank everybody who's coming in and listening to us. Thank you. We hope you all enjoyed it, and have a great day, everybody. Seriously, keep it safe out there. Times are tough, and, we want to see you guys come back.